Okay, today we're going to talk about the new revenue tool that we've started since October 1. And this is a tool that will be used daily in morning meeting, and then it transitions nicely into your weekly revenue meeting, as well as being used for driving the documentation for your nurses on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to talk a little bit about the tool. And I wanted to let you know that if there's anything about the colors that you find distracting or you want to have changed, that's easy enough. Just let me know. We can take the color out. We can change it. Sometimes up on a screen, something can be overwhelming or distracting for you, so we want this to be as user-friendly as possible. Anytime in Excel you see something that has a red triangle in the cell, that indicates that there's a comment in that cell. The comment might be something telling you about what we specifically want inside the cell, or why something happens, a color change, something becoming bold, something being outlined. So for example, under name, this is to let you know that residents who are in the first 8 days of their stay are going to be orange in color. Then we have room numbers. We have qualifying hospital stay, and that is to address when they entered the hospital and when they left the hospital. And when you put these two dates in, this number in the column G will automatically calculate. It will turn yellow if it is a stay that is less than 5 days. And that's because it wants to prompt you to have conversations to make sure that indeed the patient did have a 3-day qualifying hospital stay, that there was not an observation day in there, that all of a sudden we bill for 30 days, 40 days, we've been providing services, then we go to submit a claim and find out that they didn't have a qualifying hospital stay. So anytime the stay is less than 5, this will turn yellow, and you should be having conversations to make sure that indeed that person had a 3-day qualifying hospital stay for Medicare eligibility. The next column is going to be the admission date, and this is the date that they are accessing their Medicare. So somebody might come into the facility, they may have been in 2 months ago, or they might have come in and they weren't eligible for Medicare at the time, and then something happened afterward, a few days later. They changed payer sources, and now they're Medicare. This would be the date that we access Medicare. So it's Medicare admission, not necessarily the facility admission date. Prior level of function, you may or may not have been talking about this prior to 10-1. We want to make sure that we are having those discussions, and that's because we were concerned that when people were looking at discharge planning for folks, they were really treating payers the same. They were treating all patients regardless of payer based on a benchmark that you perhaps had, trying to get people returned back to the community based on managed care expectations. So if they wanted you to have your length of stay less than 20 days, less than 17 days, we were following that, but we were doing that for our Medicare, the traditional Med A's as well. And they have two different expectations for outcomes. A managed care company is going to expect that the patient is able to return to the community at the next lower level of care, whereas traditional Med A, they're expecting that the patient returns to their prior level of function. So it's important that you have this conversation as part of your discharge planning and any conversations that you have in regard to your lengths of stay. And there's a drop down for that, and they are either independent, supervision, limited, extensive, or dependent. Diagnosis 1, 2, and 3. The first diagnosis is expected to be the primary reason for the SNF admission. So this should match on your cert, this should match in PCC, and as a team you should have this discussion and everyone agree that indeed that is the primary reason that the person's care is being delivered at that SNF. And so what happens is you have therapy that's working over on their side, and they perhaps are projecting a PDPM score, and you have clinical and they're projecting a PDPM score, and I'll have people asking me, well, why are they different? And my response to you is, I don't know. Why are they different? You should be having discussions about it and making sure that you're using the same data for your primary reason for SNF admission. You should be using the same data about somebody's performance under GG tasks. So therapy can't be looking at it and only using their 1 day of interaction with the patient, and clinical is using 3 days the way we're expected to. It needs to be usual performance, and that needs to be a collaborative decision between the disciplines. The next two diagnoses are meant to be major comorbidities that indeed are also driving the care. They may or may not have been something that was active in the hospital, but they lay there as a comorbidity that is at risk for exacerbation because of that hospitalization or because of whatever reason it was that they were in the hospital. So the fact that they have an infection or a wound or that they were dehydrated. All of those things may have an impact on a couple of other comorbidities. So in essence, we're looking for 3 diagnoses that are really driving the patient's care and the reason that they're staying there at the facility. Interrupted stay, pretty much most of them are going to be no, but you are going to have people that are going to have and experience an interrupted stay where they're out of the facility less than 4 days, so 3 calendar nights. As long as they return by midnight of the 3rd calendar night, it would be considered an interrupted stay. And that does not matter whether they're discharged to a hospital, discharged back to home, discharged to an assisted living. It does matter if you send them to another nursing home and then they come back to you. That would not be considered an interrupted stay, no matter how long they are gone. If you say no, you do not need to put anything in this second column. If you say yes, it will turn red and bold, and it's just meant to highlight to you that yes, we have some people interrupted stay. So your business office manager is aware of that. There are some things that have to happen perhaps on the census side, and everybody can proceed as we get toward triple check, and everybody has a good understanding of where they are with their variable rate adjustment. When you say yes, it's going to expect that you tell us how many days they were off Medicare or out of the facility. So how many days they were in the hospital, how many days they were at home, how many days since you've cut them from Medicare and they stayed in your building. So if we say 2, you will see that the variable rate adjustment column will then adjust to that. So you see it went to 17 because we subtracted the 2 days they were out of the facility. This allows you to always know where somebody is in their variable rate stay in regards to interrupted stays. People have asked, can I add a column in here that will keep track of their 100 days so that you would put in prior days used? And yes, that can happen. Yes, I will have that happen, but I'll have to do that over the next couple of weeks as I'm making the additional updates to the tool. So it's not going to happen over the weekend. Okay, so if we take that out of there and we say no, then there's nothing that needs to be done in the next column. Some people are using this interrupted stay to mark that the person has gone to the hospital. So they put it there. They don't put anything in this column. They're just saying, yes, they're at the hospital. And this way they know when they come back, I have to address, was it an actual interrupted stay, or can I take them off the sheet because it's been more than 3 calendar days since they've been gone? Then you could take them off of the sheet because you're going to need a new 5-day, you're going to need a new cert, you're going to need to start them all over again. So that's a good use of that column. Certs 1, 2, and 3 are going to change color based on regulation. The first one is going to turn red if it's greater than 3 days from admission because we're looking for the doctor to come in between days 3 and 5. And so closer to 3 under PDPM. So when you see patterns of this turning red, then one of your questions would be, why is it that the doctor can't get in here any quicker? What can we do to have that happen so that he can assist us with identifying the most appropriate diagnosis, giving us additional diagnosis, making consults, or other types of things? The second cert will turn red if it's greater than 14 days from this admission date, and that's because that is the regulation. And the third column will turn red if it's greater than 30 days from this second one, again, because it's regulation. Now, some people have asked, why can't you add additional columns? Sometimes I need a 4th cert or I need a 5th cert. And that's true, but it's really an exception. Most of our lengths of stay are really less than 30 days, regardless of whether they're traditional Med-A or a managed RUG. So we only put the 3 columns, but you have the opportunity that if you needed additional space, you can identify that through a comment. So if you look at this patient here, the first 2 were signed on September 4th. The next one would have been due on or before 10/4, so I'm going to put 10/4 there to keep it in compliance. And if they're still there in November, you would want to go here and right-click your mouse, insert comment, and say additional cert dated 11/1. Okay, whatever you want to put there. It's not going to let you know whether 11/1 is in compliance or not, but it is going to let you know that, yes, we've got another cert that was completed. So we'd see this little red triangle. People would be able to hover over that and see there was another cert that had been dated and make the determination themselves about whether or not that was within 30 days. Once you want the comment to be gone from the cell, you would right-click, delete comment, and you don't have that there any longer. Okay, so that's the certs. And it's much easier to do that than to have 2 more columns that get left blank more often than not. MDS, there's only 2 choices, IPA or 5-day. The ARD, the only thing you're going to notice about this is that if they are red all it's indicating to you is that this is an ARD that's in the future, meaning you still have the opportunity to influence it with more specific diagnosis, conditions, services, and you may even change the ARD in itself. So that's all that really means. That's not a compliance concern. The next 4 rows make up your PDPM score. So the first one is PT and OT, the second one being speech, the third being nursing, and the fourth NTA. When you see any of this pink with red, it's telling you that you got the lowest category in that component. Okay. In this first row, we have the P for PT and OT. I did add additional color prompts here. So if you're in any of these cells and you click in there, it will tell you that if they are major joint, it will be green. So you see this person here that has a B, it's green. They're in a major joint. Acute neuro, the cell would turn blue. So you'll see down here this N and it turns blue. Then you have medical management being this red, that's the lowest component. And the other ortho would turn yellow. When you are inside the SLP, it's going to tell you A, red, no good, no qualifiers, lowest category you can get in the component. But then it also tells you the 5 things that could change that A to a different letter. So if you know that somebody's BIM score is less than 13 and they're showing up in A, then you know that that's not the appropriate projection. Okay, or you know that they have a swallowing problem because you've seen it documented and we've addressed it, or that they had a mechanically altered diet. You would know that this A is not accurate and that you would have to have a different projection. So speaking of projections, all of these 4 letters in lowercase means that this is what we're projecting to get. And once the MDS is completed, the MDS coordinator should change these to capital letters to indicate that that is the true score we got when we finished the MDS. This third row here is for the nursing component. Well, there's 26 different letters in here. So I don't know about you, but I'm not going to remember what all of them fall into, at least not in the first couple of weeks. So if you look at this and you click on any of the cells, it's going to tell you that an X is in the physically reduced category. Okay, so you see an X. Well, here's a K. K is in special care low. Then we have a Q. Q is in clinically complex, and so forth and so forth. So this lets you know where they are in the nursing rugs. Okay, what nursing category did you get in? But you want to take it one step further. Well, what is in a special care low category and how do I get to a high? What do I need? All right, you have the opportunity to either check on this P, and now that opens up a screen that tells you the qualifiers for extensive services, special care high, special care low, and clinically complex. And you can use your back arrow up top and take you back to the report. In addition, you could click down here on EHLC, and all that stands for is extensive, high, low, and clinically complex, and it gets you the same exact screen. So that just helps you to be able to know, well, what do I need to get from a low to a high? What keeps them in that category? And then we have our NTA, and that's going to do the same thing where if it's red, it's the lowest category. If you check in any of the boxes, it will tell you no points is going to be red, and that's an F. And then if you wanted to know what is a D, 3 to 5 points. Oh, here's a B, 9 to 11 points. Awesome. Well, I can't remember. How do I know if I captured all the points that I expect? How many points do I get for something for diabetes or COPD? If you click on this M or you click on NTA, it's going to open up for you all of the things that have points. We've arranged it so at the top in this salmon color are all things that only require a check mark on the MDS. You still need information to support those check marks in the medical record, but you don't need a specific ICD-10 to get these points. When you scroll down and you see this I-8000, these are all of the categories that will give you points, but they need a specific ICD-10. So you should either use your CMS PDPM mapper or your NTA book that we've provided for you that has the specific codes that will get you those points. Okay? Use your back button and you'll be back at your report. Now we have BIMS. It will turn red if it's 13 to 15 because we're looking to get under 13, and we're having social workers do this weekly until we're under 13 or the patient discharges. Okay, so you want to ask those questions. If somebody's there longer than 30 days, so we've gone through the 4 weeks and they still haven't been at 12, you can continue to do those weekly, or you would be able to, when you identify that you're going to do an IPA for something, you can have a BIMS score done on that same day. You can have a BIMS interview. So it's not like GG where we have to wait 3 days to get all of that. When you identify the need for an IPA, you can have the social worker or someone go to do a BIMS interview on that day and still be able to use it. I will caution you that when you go to do these, if a social worker identifies a change, you should communicate that change to the MDS coordinator as soon as possible. Because we just had an example where a BIMS score going from a 13 to a 12 was enough to warrant doing an IPA. And so the social worker did exactly what they were supposed to do. They did the interview, they went in, they actually were all ready to record this on this tool. They were excited to tell everybody, hey, we're down to a 12. But if they had taken it one step further and told the MDS coordinator yesterday when they did it, we could have set the IPA yesterday and got the higher payment a day earlier. So we're not going to lose the payment. We're going to get it starting today if we set the IPA, but we could have got it yesterday if that had been communicated. So this tool is meant to focus us and to prioritize things and to keep everybody on the same page, but it does not replace the need for communication. So you still need to communicate throughout the day with or without this tool, and make sure that therapy is talking with nursing, nursing's talking with social workers are talking with the speech therapist, and dietary is talking to the speech therapist. All of those disciplines have to be talking to each other about their data and what they find and how it crosses over into what their areas of concern are. Next, you have the PHQ-9, and that will turn red if it's an 8 or a 9, because we're looking for a score of at least 10 that will impact depression. This transition of stay column, this will go away once everybody on your list is gone that were admitted before October 1st. So all of these August and September people, as they're discharged, as they come off of Medicare, they will come off of the sheet. And when there are no longer anybody before 10/1, I will remove that column. The only reason that was put there is to let people know, the ones that were in transition, where they were with their variable rate adjustment. Anybody who's been admitted 10/1 or later, you'd only be paying attention to this column for your variable rate. And these automatically calculate for you. Nursing skill. So we don't expect you to be outlining all of the things that a nurse needs to include in their note here. All right, a nurse should be able to know what their note should include based on the 3 diagnoses you provide them, as well as some indication here under what we're skilling them for every day. What we don't want to happen is that you start to fill this in with all kinds of lab results and everything else going on, and all of a sudden the box is this wide. Because now you've got that for 20 people, 18 people, 63 people if you're Bel Air, 70 people. That's overwhelming. It's too much. You're not going to be able to talk about this every day, and there's no sense in having that in there, and it's not going to make your nurse's notes any better, I assure you. Okay, so we want to keep this something that's very brief and descriptive to say what we do every day for this patient. And it's not that you're just putting down nutrition. What are you doing about nutrition every day? All right, not just pain. What are you doing about pain every day? You don't have to put the results in. You don't have to give me a whole list of what lab work has been done or any of that stuff. But the primary intent of this cell is that when therapy says to you, I'm no longer going to be able to treat them, they're coming off of rehab, or we're not going to treat them 5 days a week, you should immediately be able to look at this box and make a determination about whether or not the last treated day of rehab will be their last Medicare day, or if you will be able to continue to cover them under nursing skill. Okay, so don't make that so that it's some long, drawn-out box, because it's too overwhelming for your team. Next, are they on rehab? What are the disciplines? Is it 5 days a week? It's important we don't lose sight of that, because when it's no longer 5 days a week, you've got to have nursing skill in order to keep them under Medicare. One of the changes you guys asked for was for the discharge planning, denial, and secondary payer to be on this first tab so that it would stay constant on your weekly tool. And that made sense to do that, since discharge planning in itself might very well have lots of changes happening from a day-to-day basis. So by keeping that here, it will allow it to remain and not need to be rewritten and readdressed necessarily in writing on your weekly tool. Planned discharge date. When this turns yellow, this is to indicate to you that these discharges are all happening this week. And this week goes Sunday to Saturday. It doesn't mean the next 7 days. So when you're able to sort by that using this button, you would be able to see, where people are discharging and how many of them are going to be in a particular week or a particular day. Okay, so you could say, oh, geez, I got all of these people that are going to be discharged. This is an old tool, so probably these people are already gone. But you'd be able to see how many you have on a certain day, how many you have in the week. You can adjust your staffing. You could adjust perhaps some of these discharges if they're appropriate and perhaps not at their prior level of function yet. Last covered day, this needs to be a date that's put in there, as well as denial. When you've issued a denial, you need a date, not a yes or a no, because the date is going to be what allows us to see whether or not we were compliant with a 48-hour time frame from the last covered day. Yeses and nos won't do that. Okay, so we want to make sure that we're putting dates in there. In the secondary payer, you should have a drop-down box that allows you to see that whether it was Medicaid. I'm not sure where it went on this training tool. But you can see whether they're private pay, private Medicaid, or pending Medicaid, Medicaid, hospice, all of those different payers that are there. When I was initially doing this, we had this set up so that you would have a policy for your NOM-NOC letter and the policy for your ABN. But I thought, well, how many times is someone going to look at the policy? You might do it once, you might do it twice. 3 times is probably a stretch, but then that link will have outlived its usefulness. So instead what we decided to do, and I discussed it on the previous webinars, is to attach it to your denial letter that's in the end drive. So it will have your letterhead on it. You won't have to worry about getting into the end drive and going and doing it. You can actually start the process at the meeting by putting the patient's name and now saving that to a file outside of the shared drive and finishing it up after the meeting. And the second one is going to give you the ABN notice. So it'll be your actual facility with your letterhead on it. And again, you can start the process, save it over to a file, and everybody knows that at least we've started it. Everybody becomes cognizant of the fact that a denial is being issued. So that's what we're going to change that to. All of these drop downs, these little filter boxes, allow you to sort by any one of these rows, and everything will stay with them. When you are talking about your day-to-day, okay, you want to sort this either by color so that all the orange goes on top, or by admission date, and you can do it newest to oldest and you'll get the same results here. You're going to have people that are in orange up at the top. The bulk of your day-to-day meeting should be discussing these people in orange. These are fresh to your facility, perhaps don't have certs done, perhaps don't have projections. You may or may not have selected the ARD yet. BIMs may have not been done, so this gives you an opportunity to talk hard as an interdisciplinary team about these patients who are in their first 8 days. It's not to say that the rest of them get ignored every day, because through clinical meeting you'll be listening for things that happen to any of these Medicare patients that might warrant doing an IPA, but the bulk of your conversation on the day-to-day should be the people who are in orange. So I suggest that you sort it every morning, either by orange or by admission date, newest to oldest. Okay, so that way you go in there and you're prepared. When you are ready to print this out for the nurses, though, each day, you should alphabetize, do it by room number, smallest to largest, so that when you go to the documentation tab to print it, it's in room order. Okay, you're not doing it so that it's alphabetical or admission date or any of that stuff. It's in room order. Makes it much easier to hand it to the nurses who are expected to document on these people. You cannot get into any of these cells, and that's because it's not a tool for you. It's for them. So if you print this each day for the nurses, they are going to have the most up-to-date list of patients. They're going to know their diagnosis. They're going to know what we're skilling them for. They're going to know whether they're on rehab or not, and they'll know if there's any discharge plan in place for them, a date. While they're doing their med pass, while they're working on treatments, throughout the day, they can jot notes about this patient so that when they sit down to do their daily skilled note, they have a good foundation for what that note should include. In addition, you should be talking to your nurses about what the BIM score means. And I do not mean what it means in regards to payment in the speech component. The nurses, I guarantee you, care little to nothing about that. What you need to tell them about BIM score is what it means for their day-to-day. Can they have the patient sign their own consent forms? can they provide education to them that they are going to be able to rely on and that the patient's going to be able to comprehend? Am I going to be doing discharge planning with them or care planning? You need to know what the BIM score means in regards to that. So I would strongly suggest that you have conversations with your nurses about the 3 levels of BIM scores and what that means for what they do on a day-to-day basis. So that's what you're doing when you're using this tool daily. You're sorting it first for the meeting based on admission date. Before you guys leave the meeting, you would sort it by room number to print it for your nurses. And then once it's time to go to the weekly meeting, so if this was going to be a Wednesday, you would now sort this alphabetically because everyone coming to the meeting will probably bring reports that are in alphabetical order. And when you go to the Medicare tab, they will all be alphabetical for the weekly tool. These 3 columns are meant to be fresh conversations every week. So this information will not stay here. When you start sorting throughout the rest of the week and changing names and changing room numbers, this information will not sort with it because you're meant to talk about this at your Medicare meeting, save the Medicare meeting tool in a file outside of the shared drive or printing it if that's what you've chose to do at your facility. But then you should clear the contents in these cells. Because all during the week when you're putting in other information and you sort this, these things are not going to stay with those people. Okay, so you're going to have a mess. So just take it out of there. It's meant to be clear conversations. In the daily skilled notes, some people were having a problem with they would put in a minus sign to say that they weren't compliant, and then they'd move over to the next cell. You see that Excel thinks that you're trying to create a formula when you do that. So you can't. Whenever you put an X, a plus or a minus in an Excel, you have to follow it with an enter. Okay, that's how that works. So you put in a plus sign and you hit enter, it will allow you to do it. You can't do a plus sign and then move over because then it thinks you're trying to do a formula. All right, so you've got to just do it plus enter and then move over. So that's how you end up doing that. All these other things you can't get into because they come from page 1. And feed over here. So you can't get into any of those cells and make any changes. The only things you can change are in those columns. And again, clear them after your Medicare meeting. And you can write notes over here in regards to compliance or other concerns. And then I would suggest that when you have monthly QAPI meetings, you're looking at what these notes are and you have a component of your QAPI meeting that is in regards to your revenue, any risks, any concerns that you have about accurate documentation or anything else for revenue. Okay. Then you have the ability, you will have the ability to talk about your case mix and CMI stuff later on down the road. I'm putting all these things in and loading them, and then we'll have another meeting, another webinar on how that information gets used. But for right now, that's not showing up. So we've just got that hidden. Okay, so then the last thing I want to talk about is people are like, oh yeah, it's a great tool, Melissa, but guess what? Every day when I do it, my qualifying hospital stay formula goes away and I've got to email you and ask you to fix it for me. So because I want you to be able to change how big your cells are, so go over here and you drag it, or up to make the columns wider, you move that over. Because I want you to be able to do that and you want to be able to do it, there are certain things that I can't lock down. And sometimes people go into something and they're like, well, I see all these hashtags. The first thing you should do when you see hashtags is to widen the column. Hashtags in a cell typically mean that that's too big for the cell. So you can see if you're in it, it tells you it's 10-2 that's in there. You just can't see it. But if you go up to this H and get that little plus and hold your mouse and move it over, now the date is there. So whenever you see hashtags inside your tool, the first thing you should try is to change the size of the cell. Okay? So again, in order to let you do that, there are certain things that I can't lock down. So I have this cell for qualifying hospital stay locked, and I have these transitional days and day of stay locked. If you were to go across the whole thing and right-click and clear contents, unfortunately, it clears the formulas and the formatting even in those locked cells, and we don't want that to happen. So the option is for you to go and clear the cells that are before those automatically populated. So if you do Adams to 10-2, right-click, clear contents, see the 23 goes away by itself because that was a formula in here. Then you can go from the admission over to this next calculation, right click, clear contents. See that date goes away. And then from nursing skill over and clear those contents as well. So I can hear people saying right now, oh my God, are you kidding me? That's too much work. 3 extra clicks. I've got to do this. I got to do that. And unfortunately you do, because I have to be able to let you do other things with this tool. So I can't lock this down and not let you change it. The other option for that, which I think is easier, is to go into this first cell, hit your backspace, and then hit tab and backspace all the way across as quickly as you can go. Tab, backspace, tab, backspace. It will take it all out of there and it won't impact any of your formulas. Once you've done that, then you're able to go to this filter button to sort it, and you can do A to Z. It will put that blank one down at the bottom. It doesn't keep it orange. It doesn't impact any of your formulas, and then you're able to move forward. So I actually think that that's an easier way to do it, but you have the option either way of clearing the contents before and between each of the automatically calculated areas, or using your backspace tab and moving across. So I hope that that helps. We'll have another webinar, like I said, once we put in the CMI and the Medicaid or MMQ type discussions. Thank you for joining.